way prior to the Steam Deck coming out, Valve promised that spare parts were going to be available. It was going to be this open system that anybody could repair, and everybody was really excited for it. It is now May, and up until fairly recently, we hadn't really heard anything about these spare parts. But fear not, because we've known since about February that iFixit was going to be an authorized parts seller. Basically, they're going to receive official parts from Valve and they're going to sell them. And as of today, the recording of this video, probably yesterday as you see this, that promise has now been fulfilled. Right now, there is 20 parts available, so there's 2 pages of them. But this is, as you'll probably realize pretty quickly, not every single part you actually need. So, iFixit did a little bit of an oopsie, and they made the list public temporarily before the list was supposed to be available. And because they know you can't, unshow stuff on the internet, they want to put out this statement. Earlier today, we published some pages related to our upcoming parts launch with Valve. These went live earlier than we planned, so we ended up taking them down. If you did get parts in order, we'll honor it. So if you ordered them early, that was actually really cool. They were still going to ship you the parts. And when journalists started to ask them, like, hey, it was already made public, can you just share the full list with us so we can talk about it? They said, you know what, might as well, it's free marketing. And with The Verge, they gave them this list right here. What you'll notice, though, is even with this list, which I believe has 10 or so extra items, it's still not every single part available. So you can't buy every individual part and then build up a Steam Deck completely from scratch. Not because they don't want you to do that, just because this is the first wave of parts, and more parts are going to be added in the future. So, most notably, things that are missing are the battery and the SSD. So, those do actually have pages on the store right now. They're basically placeholder pages. Obviously, with the SSD, there's going to need to be 3 separate pages for the 3 different models. Battery, not so much. There's also the missing touchpads, the missing D-pads, and the missing buttons. Basically, the plastic tops for those elements. If you want to buy things like the membrane for the D-pad, that actually is available, but you're not going to really be able to do much without the actual buttons themselves. Unless, I guess, you wanted to go and, 3D print your own buttons or something like that, but the official ones are not here. And I wouldn't be surprised that when these are available, there is some sort of bundle where you can buy them together. So rather than having to buy the membrane and the buttons separately, let's say you needed to fully replace your D-pad. You could save maybe a couple of dollars and then buy them together. That seems like a fairly reasonable thing to do, and I'm pretty sure iFixit has done it plenty of times in the past. Other things that are missing are things like the metal frame. While the front and the back plate are available, there's also this metal bracket that goes inside of the Steam Deck to make it so it's actually rigid. You can't buy that right now. The EM shields aren't available, so if those break, which they probably won't, you can't really do much about that. And also the ribbon cables to actually connect things inside of the Steam Deck aren't available, so be extra careful not to break those, but at some point I would imagine all those things are going to be sold. Something you'll notice on the Verge part list is a lot of the parts seem to be doubles. We have things like the right thumbstick part only and the right thumbstick fix kit. These actually are 2 separate products though. So the fix kit version is going to include some tools you actually need to get the part installed. If you happen to not own any of the iFixit toolkit, for example, you're probably going to need something to get in there. But if you already own the tools you need and you want to save yourself $5, at least with the US pricing, you can just order the part by itself and not get a bunch of extra tools you don't need. You'll also notice the way the screens are listed. We have the 512 gig screen, and we have the 64 gig or 256 gig screen. Now, obviously, screens don't have a storage capacity. These are the screens that ship by default with those devices. Now, I don't have an answer for you about whether you can go and use the 512 gig screen on the 64 gig or the 256 gig model, or vice versa. I don't know. My presumption, though, is there's no difference between them, and you can swap in either one you want. Judging by what I can see here, they look like they're effectively identical. If there's anyone out there who happens to own two Steam Decks, maybe like, I don't know, Linus Tech Tips, for example, finding that out would be very, very useful. Now, the motherboard currently isn't available for sale, but there is a part page for it with the part actually being listed. And I've seen some people complaining about the price that it has, because right now it is going for $350, which, considering that the base model Steam Deck is $399, it is really, really expensive to replace that. Now, that doesn't mean that it's overpriced. The Steam Deck is really, really aggressively priced. This motherboard includes the APU, it includes the RAM, it doesn't include the storage, and obviously includes the motherboard itself. That package altogether, I can see why it costs so much. Now, I'm sure that some of the curious among you are wondering how much it would cost to buy every single Steam Deck part that is currently available, obviously excluding things like the different regional power adapters and only buying one of the screens. This is considering the fact that not every single part is available, so the actual price would be a bit more. But with the parts currently available, using the anti-glare screen is $704.82. Without the anti-glare screen, it is $674.82. So, if you did include every single part, with probably the battery and the SSD being the most expensive parts, I would guess it's probably around $1,000, maybe $1,100 to build a Steam Deck completely from scratch. Now, that doesn't mean that every single time that Valve sells a Steam Deck, they're losing, $600 or $700. That's just not how pricing works. Obviously, buying the individual parts, buying a small amount of them, in this case, probably one of them, is always going to make the prices higher because you don't get the advantages of bulk buying items. But I wouldn't be surprised if Valve actually is losing money on Steam Deck purchases and then making money back by actually selling the games. Besides the missing parts, there is one thing that is missing. That's the fact that you can't buy individual components. What I mean by this is, let's say you want to buy a right thumbstick. When you buy the right thumbstick, you're buying the entire right thumbstick mechanism with the daughter board and the thumbstick all together. This makes sense initially because most people are probably not going to know how to actually take the thumbstick off and actually put it back and make it work properly. But I hope that sometime down the line, they do start to sell these individual components for people who actually want to do those extra repairs. Maybe they want to save a bit of money and things like that. With the motherboard component, I wouldn't be surprised if that never happens though with the CPU and the RAM. Just because, especially with the CPU, that is custom made for the Steam Deck, and it is soldered directly onto the board. But if they would sell things like, USB ports and things like that, that would be nice to see at least. One thing pretty unclear to me is why the SSD, or better yet, the 3 SSDs, aren't included in this initial wave. Now, the SSD isn't something that's going to really break anytime soon unless you dump water on the Steam Deck, but it is something that will at some point have to be replaced, and maybe you want to do an upgrade or something like that. Now, it's not a part that's difficult to replace, at least from my understanding, but if I had to guess, it probably has to do with supply availability. And I wouldn't be surprised if part of the reason the Steam Deck's taking so long to get out is because it's difficult to actually get these SSDs. As for the battery though, that's a bit more of a complex situation. And if you've seen some of the teardowns, especially Linus's teardown, well, getting the battery out isn't the most obvious thing and isn't the easiest thing to do. So, in a statement to The Verge, they said, "Our initial release includes the parts and tools to complete most repairs. We don't have a solution for battery repairs on day one, but we are committed to working with Valve to maintain these devices as they age. Battery replacements are going to be essential to making the Steam Deck stand the test of time." So there is going to be battery repairs available at some point, it's just a matter of when that point is going to be. Now, my guess is they're probably also waiting to get the ribbon cables, because I know there is a ribbon cable that sits directly on top of the battery. and it's glued down to the battery, and it's very, very, very easy to break, considering it's a ribbon cable, and it's also glued down. So when those are available, I imagine then they will start worrying more about the battery. There are also certainly safety concerns where idiots like me, for example, might pierce the battery and die. And that's a bad thing. I don't want to do that. So iFixit is probably also working on tutorials to easily get the battery out where even idiots can follow it and get everything done. I don't think it's ever going to happen, but I think it would be kinda cool for Valve to offer a do-it-yourself Steam Deck. Once all of the parts are available, let you buy them in a bundle, and then build your own Steam Deck. Even just making it more expensive, and just giving people that experience of building a handheld, which isn't something that most people really experience. Most of the time, especially with modern handhelds, you can't even really get inside of them, let alone building them completely from scratch. But considering the current pricing to do that, I think I'm good, and if I want to buy a Steam Deck, I will buy one with all the parts already put together. It seems like a much, much better idea, even considering the however long the wait is actually going to be. So let me know what you think about this change. Do you happen to have a broken part in your Steam Deck and have been waiting to repair it? Or maybe you just want to make sure everything is ready so that when something does go wrong, you actually can get it fixed. I would love to know. So if you like this video, I'm going to go and like this video. If you really like the video and you want to support words, channel, people, these cool people. I'm not reading you in this outro. Patreon thingy. Yes, these guys are cool. Podcast, Tech of Tea, gaming channel, Brodie Robertson Plays. That's it for me. That was terrible.